Welcome back to the Mastering Risk Podcast. I am your host, Dr. D. Today, I'm talking about the 5 things I did in my business to be ready for the disasters that are coming in 2026. So sit back, grab yourself your favorite beverage. Let's get at it. All right, welcome back. Shout out to all our new followers over on YouTube and on the podcast app. We're on all platforms, Spotify, Apple, whatever you use, iHeart, we are there. Thank you very much for the continued dedication and all your feedback. We greatly appreciate it, good, bad, or indifferent. Whatever commentary you have about this show and about this podcast, please drop it down in the comments. Drop over to our website, www.preparednesslabs.ca. The link is in the description. Click on there. There's a contact us form. Tell us absolutely everything you think about this podcast. And a shout out to the t-shirt I'm wearing, which is from Mrs. Doubtfire, the play. I came here to Ottawa. My wife and family saw it at the National Arts Centre. An absolute amazing, incredible performance. So this is a shout out if you ever get an opportunity in your lives to dedicate time and your money to supporting the arts. There is nothing more entertaining than live theater. It's far greater and far better than you will ever see on Netflix or in a movie theater. So what we're talking about today is very simple. There are 5 things that I did right now in the last couple of weeks to prepare my business for the disasters that are coming in 2026. I know that the 2020s are an incredibly disruptive decade for very well-known reasons. We knew the 2020s would be this way. No, we didn't have a pre-pandemic, but we knew the 2020s would be this incredibly disruptive decade where the world order was jockeying for position, reorganizing. Humans do this every 80 years. It's like clockwork. The 2020s was our turn after the 1940s. So understanding that we knew this would be a chaotic decade decades ago, people have been doing extensive planning to be ready for it. The problem is that the actors change, the voices change, and we're not sure what the economic, political, and natural events are going to be in the 2020s and going into the 2030s. But we know that what we've seen to date, we're halfway through this decade, and it's likely to only get more disruptive. No, it's not apocalyptic. The sky's not falling. I don't think the aliens are going to land on the White House lawn. But we're going to have a continued, regular level of incidents and disruption and nefarious actors across the 4 areas of risk that we deal with here at Mastering Risk, which is cyber, reputational, strategic, and operational. And so because of that, businesses need to do things, intentionally take action. The vast majority of it is free of charge on things that you can specifically do in your business to get your operations, even if it's just your Etsy store, or it's a print-on-demand business that you print t-shirts with your favorite flowers on them. It doesn't matter the extent of the depth of your business. These are 5 things that you can do to replicate what I've done that just mitigates risk. We can't take risk to zero, but you can do a great amount of work to get it there. Number 1 is that I have my business ready to be back up in 3 hours. We live in a digital age. So every moment that my business is not up and running, every moment that my clients can't access www.preparednesslabs.ca, they can't access my content on YouTube. I use YouTube for a number of courses that I operate. These are systems that need to be up and running, which means my clients need access to internet, cell phones, those type of things to get access and to get regular benefits. I feed those that are members of my Mastering Risk, the community, the businesses that are in there, get the, every 72 hours we send out an update on what happened in the last 72 in risk management, bespoke to their industry, and a whole bunch of really important information. We put out weekly videos so you can see there's a regular progression of material that we put out into cyberspace to reach everyone to provide this kind of advice. So for me, being down is very, very important to recover quickly. And so because of that, I've built a system to whereas I can be back up and running in 3 hours, which means I spoke about this in the last episode, but in detail, what I have done is I have access to 3 different internet services. So two standard Bell and Rogers here in Canada, and then satellite internet through Starlink. So you have the 3 different options where I can get my systems up and running. I have backup power to keep those systems running. So when the power goes out because of a storm, which happens periodically here in Canada, my basic internet is up and running. My cell network continues. And all of my material that I have in the office that supports the production of this type of content and the operations of the business is powered by an alternate source. So irrespective of whether the power goes out, my business maintains operations. Irrespective of whether Bell, Rogers, or Starlink goes down, or 2 of the 3 go down, I am up and running. You can't mitigate everything to 0, which means if all 3 of those providers go down, I'm out. But if all 3 of those providers are down, so are all of my customers. And so there's a logic behind doing what you can to mitigate to near 0, but you can't get to 0. Specifically, what I've done is I've laid out in a mapping way, and we talk about this in Module 2 of our course, Mastering Risk, when we explain in detail how to set out your company mapping, how to draw it out, all the interactions, and then to physically start isolating and picking pieces apart. I mapped out all of the lines of business that required to support the outcome. And then I looked at each one and see which one has an exposure to or dependency on a critical infrastructure, which we spoke about last week. And then I mapped out how do I fix that. And so I have got the redundancy in the cell network. I've got the redundancy in the power. And that is basically so the first thing that I have done to wrap up number 1 is that my business will be down for no longer than 3 hours unless there is a catastrophic failure of critical infrastructure, which means all of the internet providers go down at the same time. If all of them are down at the same time, it's a bigger issue than my business. So that's number 1. I've made that preparation and I've made the time investments to figure that out. And all it simply means is I haven't bought more internet. I just have my cell network and my home internet on 2 different providers, right? I mean, the Rogers outage years ago that took down the whole internet for the Rogers thing was a good indicator, and the company has obviously fixed that, and the issue of the probability of that is not 0. But what I've done is mitigate, so if Rogers goes down, or Bell goes down, or Starlink goes down, or 2 of the 3 go down, I just it takes an hour or so to switch everything back up and get it up and running. Or an hour for me to actually notice it's down. But everything gets up and running. So that's the idea behind not having to spend more money, just spending your money differently. I'm going to buy home internet and I'm going to buy cell services. I just buy them in 2 different companies so that I have just that little bit of redundancy. So number 2 is what they've often referred to as an air gap backup system. And it's a 3-2-1 air gap is the phrase that I've seen on the internet. And I don't own that phrase, but I'm just using it. Air gap means you're putting a space between your hard drive that holds your business information and the internet. And an air gap means that when you have offside storage, I use cloud storage, for example. Cloud storage in reality is just a server farm somewhere else. Like there's no clouds in the sky. I know they're talking about putting cloud servers in satellites, but the reality of cloud service just means you're renting a piece of off-site server farm somewhere in the world to store your data. But that server farm is hooked up to the internet. The 1-2-3 air gap idea is you have your critical data backed up and stored somewhere that is not accessible by the internet, which creates that air gap. And that means that I have a hard drive that sits in my office that's not plugged into my computer. And I back it up on a regular basis. Probably, I'd like to say daily, but real world happens every couple of days. I back it up. So yeah, if I lose everything in a ransomware attack, I'm probably going to lose the last 48 hours of data. But that offsite storage has the air gap, which means that information is not locked down by ransomware, right? Which means all I have to do is go get a new piece of hardware, right? By the way, which is my backup laptop, which is a really old laptop. But basically, I can take that data that's on that hard drive, hook it up to a brand new piece of IT that's not infected, restart my business, right? Or at least get access to my client information, all of my backup and my data. And while the ransomware person is berating me with all kinds of demands for money, etc., even if that's lost forever and I never pay a penny and it goes away, I'm down 48 hours. I use this data. I'm back up and running. Now, that's not a perfect fail-safe because sometimes ransomware will plant various different seeds into your data sources and it gets transferred. I get it. Nothing is 100% perfect. But what I've done is create that backup. So if right now I lost access to all of my online platforms and all of my online data and all of my cloud storage and my Shopify store, and I lost access to everything out there, I would have the core data, the core videos, the core feed. I could restart a new YouTube channel. I could upload all of the videos, all of my material back up to YouTube. I could create and upload the podcast episodes. Like, all of this stuff could be redone and I could recover probably within 24 hours of good work. I'm going to be back up and running, losing a couple of days worth of data. And the ransomware folks, well, if I pay them, I pay them. If I don't, I don't. That's another discussion for a podcast episode. But the idea is, as I've created an air gap. So to wrap to the first two things is, I have systems where I'm never going to be down for longer than 3 hours unless there's a catastrophic risk or catastrophic loss of critical infrastructure through building redundancies in my key areas. The second one is I have a 1, 2, 3 air gap, and I love that phrase. I'll just keep using it, of where I have my data stored that is not connected to the internet. Yes, I use clouds. I love cloud services because it's easy. You don't tie up a lot of hard drive space on your computer. But if all that goes away, I have something else to save the day. So the third one is I have the ability to be remote. And the ability to be remote is possible simply because I have, a laptop and I have a cell phone, etc. But what it means is I've sat down and I looked at my business at Preparedness Labs Incorporated and I said, okay, what are the key things I need to have from a physical infrastructure perspective to make this business operate? And can I make them mobile? Do I have the ability to pick up a bag in my office grab a couple of key pieces of hardware and go to a cafe, go to a friend's house or a hotel? For example, if I was ever forced to evacuate, a human being in the face of a disaster can only do one of two things. You can shelter in place or evacuate. Those are your only two choices. If I evacuate, well, obviously I have a trifecta of preparedness plans. I have a destination to evacuate to. When I go to my pre-planned evacuation destination, I show up with a bag with everything in it that has all the physical hardware things that I need to carry on my business. So the reality is, I give myself 30 minutes, 5 times, 6 times. I give myself 30 minutes to evacuate and my business is back up and running. I can be that quick. Now, obviously, if I'm evacuating for a disaster, I'm going to be more concerned about my family than my business. The point is I've made the steps necessary to identify in a very easy piece of paper. And often what you do is you just create a piece of paper. And we recommend this in our trifecta of preparedness stuff. And if you're looking for that, on our website, there's a roadmap to resilience. So if you go to www.preparednesslabs.ca and you scroll down, there's a roadmap to resilience, which is a 5-part YouTube series. And there's a playlist here on YouTube as well. And a 5-part Substack and a 5-part podcast episode that gives you all of the evidence-based material that you and your family need to have the basic structure of a family emergency preparedness plan. And it's on our website free of charge. Free, as it should be. And plus as well, we also have a 4-page quick download that's available. If you go up to the top of our website under catalog and you sort by price, the first 6 or 7 items that we have for sale, about 30% of our inventory is absolutely free of charge. And you just download that and you'll get evidence-based. How do I start? Where do I begin in the preparedness journey? But the point is, I've taken the state and I've made the list. The reason lists are important in evacuations and emergencies is when we increase our stress level and anxiety level and things get very difficult and it's very challenging and the world's coming down on us and you're under a lot of pressure, we don't always think clearly, right? And so if I've taken the time and written and created a list of things that I need to bring with me on an evacuation, it's the same for my business as it would be for my family. I have a very clear list of things that when I evacuate this house, for whatever reason, and we don't care why, I mean, it's hazard agnostic, it doesn't matter. I grab the list. The list tells me what to grab. I don't have to think in the middle of an emergency what I need to grab or what I should grab. And it didn't cost me anything but a few minutes to jump on Apple Notes, create something, print it off, and then put it in a prominent place where everybody knows where it is. So when it's time to evacuate the house, we just look at this list, we grab what's on the list, we don't think, we act, and we go. And then we don't miss anything. So I have the same thing for my business. So to sum up the first 3 is, I've got redundancy built in so that I can have my business up and running in a critical infrastructure failure, whether it be power, cell phone, or both. I have an air gap where I have data. My backup data is stored not connected to the internet, so that by theory, I can restart from a ransomware attack or a denial of service. If I no longer have access to everything the business owns electronically, I can restart the business from scratch using the data that I keep offline and away from. It's not even hooked up to my computer at any time other than the one time when I back up. And the third one is I have that ability to have the business back up and running in 30 minutes from any location where I have cell phone or internet or broadband internet access. So those are the first 3 things that I've done to get my business ready for 2026. The fourth thing is I have created a 90-day disaster line of credit. And this is something that when I looked at the disruptions in the business and I planned, okay, I, like a small business, I need to present to my clients that I'm trustworthy, I'm reliable, I'm knowledgeable, and I'm somebody who provides evidence-based information, and I'm not an apocalyptic freak that talks about the end of the world. So to do that, I need to produce a lot of material. I need to regularly sell material. And like any business, you have to sell your goods or business. Critical infrastructure disruptions, political disruptions, economic disruptions, natural disasters, whatever they may be, can come in the middle and disrupt your entire funding flow. If most small businesses run pretty tight margins, which means the difference between your top line and your bottom line is large, there's not a lot of space there. And often what happens in a small business is we pay for everything up front on a line of credit, and then we sell a bunch of things and we take that to pay off the line of credit, and what's left over is profit, and maybe we give ourselves a salary. But for most small business owners, you don't really get much of a salary in the end. The reality is that disruptions I can't control. I have no power over whether somebody makes a dumb economic decision, whether the politicians get into a brouhaha and a bun fight, and all of a sudden they bring in some ridiculous tariff political rules that harm my business's ability to earn an income and provide quality service to my clients, right? Imagine that happens, because it's happening all the time right now, right? And imagine that happens and it's a disruptive period for 20, 30, 40, 60 days. And it significantly impacts my ability to earn money for the short period of time. But guess what? Welcome to the real world. If you've got employees, you still have to meet payroll, whether the revenue crashes or not for short periods. You still have expenses. Companies want to be paid. Some contractors want to be paid. And so what I have is I've built a 90-day line of credit. So I've looked at what my runway of expenses are. And a lot of companies have fast cash burns, so they don't necessarily have cash reserves. And that'd be great if I could just stuff away 90 days worth of operating overhead into a cash. But a lot of companies can't do that, and my company is the same. And so I've basically signed off on a 90-day emergency line of credit. So that allows me to have access to 90 days of funds to run the operation at full speed, probably longer if I'm a little bit more picky about what I do, but it ensures that as the idiocy of political and economic decisions continue in our world, that I'm doing what I can financially to provide runway space for my business to go forward. So if we think about the fourth one as whatever you think you might need, now ideally having access to cash burn is best because credit costs you money. But the reality of most small businesses, if I was to say build 3 or 4 months worth of full cash reserves and keep it in a savings account, a lot of businesses can't meet that margin. So the minimum acceptable standard, as I like to refer to, is to have access to that runway of line of credit. So the fourth thing that I've done to get my business ready for 2026 is I've built that 90-day disaster line of credit. And I think it's really important to just sit back, and I'll pause for a minute before we get into the fifth one, is to think about what the world looks like when disruptions happen. And there's something in the business continuity literature that talks about business impact assessments, which is looking at all your different lines of business and how they may hurt and how they're linked. And this is a complex thing. For most small and medium businesses, solo entrepreneurs or micro entrepreneurs, which I fall into, small businesses, 2 to 10 employees, about $1 million or less top line revenue, we think about what could go wrong. Realistically, knowing the world I'm in, I'm not talking the greater world. I'm talking about look at the operations that I run, look at the services I require, look at the clients and where they are, and what are the things that could happen to disrupt that. And then I ask that famous question, what does my world look like when this happens? What does my world look like when there's a tariff on international digital products? What does it look like when the EU starts in the 1st of June next year, their requirement to have AI acknowledgement and AI paragraphs detailing the extent to which you use AI in your company, that's going to be required to be on all of your product website, or you could face a significant fine. What are these things that could go wrong? And so this led me to number 5. And the fifth thing that I've done to get my business ready for 2026 is to create what I refer to as a one-button failover. And it is redundancy. It is building a step-by-step process of how I would replicate every single system that I have. So I've talked about the air gap. I've talked about the redundancy in my internet access. I have 2 payment providers that I use. I use Shopify and Stripe. Now, Shopify is the main store. Preparednesslabs.ca, the company's website, sits and presents itself to the world as a Shopify store. I think it's a fantastic company. There's wonderful people behind it. But I also have a backup system called Buy Me a Coffee. And I've been fans of Buy Me a Coffee for 5 years. Just if you do anything else for this video other than take down the 5 notes, drop over to Buy Me a Coffee and have a look. It's absolutely free for you to set up a Buy Me a Coffee website. You set up a company or your personal information. You go in the background and you tie it to Stripe. So you set up a formal account with the payment processor Stripe. And now you can accept payments online free of charge. Now what Stripe does, like every other payment processor, is they take a portion of your top line, right? So for example, I use Buy Me a Coffee to support the website, to support the podcast. So on the podcast site, there's a little support the show. And if you click on that, it takes you to the Buy Me a Coffee website. And it basically says, if you like what you see, if you like what you hear, if you think that Dr. D has great information and you'd like to buy him a coffee because the man is fueled by great black coffee, then click the button here and donate $5 and buy him a coffee. And I've had people buy me up to 10 coffees in the past before, but I use it and it's active. And the reason is I have Stripe as a backup. So if Shopify goes down, I can replicate. Remember I talked about the air gap? Remember I talked about the redundancy of the cell network? I can push all of my material over and within one day have a full, robust buy me a coffee / mastering risk website up and running where I can take clients' money and I can provide services to clients, digital downloads, all of that. I can do all of that on Buy Me a Coffee. That's my redundancy. So the whole thing that I've done is gone through the entire process of my business for 2025 and built in what I call that one button failover. And that means I click, I go over, and I start a little bit of work, but it gets everything up and running. All of my websites from all of my websites from Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and all of the social media sites, they can go down, and they often do go down periodically and come back up. But I independently have a list of all of the things I do. I have a list of all of my passwords, and I know this is crazy, but I have a password book. A physical, I'm old school, not a password keychain, because guess what? Your password keychain in your Apple ID or your password keychain or your authenticator app, whatever you use, remains on the internet and is accessible by nefarious actors with the right type of code. I have a codeless air gap backup system, and it's called a book with the handwritten passwords, right? So I have the ability and the passcodes. So if you look at Apple ID and various other top line IDs, the ones that are really critical to your life, Meta does this as well for their business side, and I think they do it on the personal side as well. You can have other people act as people who will vouch for you, for lack of a better term, that it really is you, and then a series of code numbers. And these are 10 or 12 digit code numbers that you get from the service provider that says, this is how we know it will really be you when you call to say somebody ransomware and hacked access to your YouTube channel, and now you don't have access to it anywhere. Here's how Google or Alphabet is going to know that it's you. And so I've gone through each one of those and prepped that. What if for example, I need access to Buzzsprout, which is my podcast, my Apple ID, and my Shopify store, right? So I've gone into each one of their terms and conditions, and I know this is incredibly boring and nobody likes to do it. But figure out exactly what your provider needs from you to confirm it's you when you get victim of identity theft or a ransomware attack. How does Shopify know it's really me? Well, there's a series of codes and there's a bunch of background stuff. How does Apple know? A bunch of background stuff. How does Meta know? A bunch of codes that are coming from very pre-verified individuals. I have that written down. It's not on any software anywhere. So it's not recorded anywhere that somebody could hack into. It's the good old-fashioned scribbler, the old Hilroy scribbler days, which I think is, by the way, still the best way to store information because the paper doesn't fall out. But in those is all that information. So that means that you can take away ransomware, you can take away all of my electronic stuff. And so the 5 things that I've done to prepare my business for 2026 is I have created ability to be back up and running on the internet through redundancy. I call it the 3-hour rule. That's when I know, by having access to different systems. And I didn't spend more money. I just selected different providers for different services: cell, internet, and then remote internet, or all 3 different providers. The second one I did is I created that air gap system, right? So I have, something like this. This is a power bank. That helps, by the way, to power your cell phone when there's the power's out. But just a little hard drive like that, representative, that holds all of my data, all the historical, all the recordings, everything I need to independently restart my business, and it's not attached to the internet, so it won't be subject to attack. The third thing is I have the ability, and I've written out, and again, in some type of piece of paper, I have a list of exactly how to evacuate my business from the house, what pieces of hardware I need, so that I have the ability in 30 minutes after I get to my evacuation destination to restart business operations from a remote location. I don't need any specific piece of building. I don't need to be in a specific space. I can replicate my business operations pretty much anywhere in the world. As long as we have access to satellite or broadband internet, we are good to go. And I have that list pre-done and ready to go. The fourth one is I have a cash runway. Now, ideally, cash runway means you have 90 or 120 days worth of full operational expenses tucked away in a cash vault, which I think is great. I don't have that. A lot of businesses don't have that level of liquidity. Fine. But what I have secured is a 90-day line of credit worth the total value of running my business for 90 days. Should the revenue completely crash off, I have the ability to keep the lights on, for lack of a better term, for that. And I think that's incredible. And the last thing is my one button failover. I have the ability to replicate everything, which means I have my payment provider, my website provider, all of this is down. And one thing I didn't mention earlier about the website provider is what I've done is, again, it gets a bit complicated, but as long as you have a reasonable drawing out of how the process works, I bought my domains through GoDaddy. My websites are run by Buzzsprout and Shopify. But the actual person who I pay for the annual to keep my domains is GoDaddy. So if Shopify goes down, if Buzzsprout goes down and they stay down, I just go into my DNS server, the DNS part of the program at GoDaddy, and I turn and I point preparednesslabs.ca to a different destination, right? And then I can start up the buy me a coffee / mastering risk would be the destination. So people would still type preparednesslabs.ca. It's just they wouldn't be taken to a Shopify store anymore. They'd now be taken to the buy me a coffee store, right? You see, I've got that ability. Now, yes, you can say right off the bat, what if they take GoDaddy? You're absolutely right. There's always risk. You cannot mitigate it to zero, but you can do a great deal. So those are the 5 things that I've done to prepare Preparedness Labs Incorporated, my business, to be ready to tackle what's coming at us in 2026. Because, my friends, this is going to be another disruptive year. But I'm a firm believer, and we talk about this at length in our Mastering Risk, the ecosystem, and all of the things that we offer small and medium business owners and entrepreneurs. We talk about at length that this is a risk-rich environment. As an entrepreneur, you need to jump in with 2 feet intelligently, which means you need to understand, you need to learn about risk, you need to be able to identify it, but then you need to embrace risk, and then you need to leverage it. And when you learn to embrace and leverage risk, you place yourself several tactical bounds ahead of your competitors. The market share that you occupy starts to grow, because as all of the AI disruptions continue, as the economic turmoil continues, you're thriving in that space of disruptions simply because you've made the logical decision that you want to understand risk, you want to embrace risk, you want to master risk, aka the name of the podcast. Thanks again for joining us this week at Mastering Risk. We appreciate all of your feedback. Drop over to our website, www.preparednesslabs.ca. Tell us what you think. Drop your comments down in the comment section. Tell us what you would like to see in future episodes. Thank you very much. Take care. Stay safe.